Good evening, everyone. Greetings and love. This is Marcia with Sanctuary and Gnoshery Libertas, and our episode 56 on February 20th, 2023. And every Monday evening, we gather together to hear a light transmission from Spirit, which we could call Holy Spirit, Great Spirit, any name really you want to call the nameless, that which cannot really be encapsulated with human words, but which is made of infinite love and infinite wisdom. And when we tune into this energy, this greater portion of ourselves, this greater aspect, then we are actually able to live our life from a more joyful, peaceful, fun, humorous place, rather than feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders, or coming from life from a bitter or resentful or angry or just even sad or helpless or despaired perspective. And so every week we gather to hear the light transmission, which is what Spirit calls the theme of the week, of what energy is in the next 7 days that we can tune into, and how can we best navigate this while aligning with our highest aspect. So that aspect of love and wisdom, which exists within the divine spark of all of us, so that we can come from that responsive place rather than that reactive place that we can tend to do when we are in the personality ego construct, and when we are kind of viewing the world, our external reality, as all there is. So these transmissions are here to help us remember that we are living within the weave. And we're going to talk about what is weave tonight. And of course, that's my term that Spirit gave me within my personal reality. So you can, call it whatever feels most true for you. But this aspect of ourselves that is always in tune and in divine synchronicity with our external realms. And when we are present and we are receptive, we are actually able to hear, see, and feel and experience these subtle cues and clues, these codes and signals and messages that are being offered to us from the weave. Now, if you'd ever like to join us here in person as a live guest, we meet every Monday at 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. You can always receive the replay in your email as well. And to do that, you would just become a member of one of either of our sites, either on patreon.com/Gnoshery Libertas or buymeacoffee.com/Gnoshery Cafe. You can also receive one-to-one readings with Spirit and private mentorships through our private membership. There's so much to remember here. And that happens on Etsy. So that would be etsy.com/shop/Gnoshery Libertas. So before I move into the meditation this evening, the reading, I'm going to take a moment to connect, and we will move into the light transmission of Dance the Dance. And Spirit said the subtitle of this one is Don't Sit This One Out. Dancing the dance, we're really going to talk about weave tonight, which is the greatest dance of our spirit, our soul, and our personality, or our ego self. You'll hear me use those terms interchangeably. The self that believes it is a person going to work, having a relationship, doing the life thing, a person who is in a linear reality, when in fact we are a multidimensional being who is experiencing the nuances of life and the input, the stimuli of it at all levels. But most often we are just distracted, and there's, so much stimuli in life to distract us that we kind of miss some of these subtle cues, which Spirit is calling weave. And so tonight, as we dance this dance of weave, we're going to talk about some of the supporting energies that help and allow us to embrace weave. And the first of that is to honor our soul's purpose, and to really delve into what does that look like and feel like. And Spirit says the weave is ramping up. And so people are going to begin to experience their external reality seemingly activated in ways that they have never noticed before. Things that may have been right in front of our faces that we have never seen are going to light up and have new meaning. And often it comes from mundane, or what we might even think are ordinary objects or phrases, or even billboards or shampoo bottles, TV or social media commercials. All of these things are part of the weave and will light up in the sense that the Holy Spirit will activate them. And when we have eyes to see and a spirit that has that discernment, which we can pray and ask for each and every day, each and every moment, then we will be able to not only see and feel the weave, but then begin to live as it. And so we're encouraged that the very first thing to do is to honor our soul's purpose, to stop fooling ourselves and to get moving on with our soul's path. So, what does that mean? Well, it means paying close attention to the subtleties of our experience and listening very, very carefully to the urgings that are begging us to honor the deepest truth of who we really are, not what we think everyone will approve of. And that's really important from Spirit's perspective, is that many people are really seeking the reflection and the recognition of others. And so they are editing themselves, or we are editing ourselves or censoring ourselves to kind of bring forth what we think everyone will approve of. And we are now being literally begged from Spirit to honor the deepest truth of who we are. And that means no longer editing or censoring. Now, of course, that doesn't mean being harmful or being rude. It means being compassionate, with our wisdom, but it also means having the bold courage to speak the deepest truth and to know it. First we must know it before we can even speak it. And often that means carving out the space or the time of reflection in our lives to allow that deepest truth of who we are to really emerge. And so we're encouraged to remember that every experience up to this point in our lives has shaped us, and even the lives that we've lived before, that our soul has experienced, are now exerting their karmic influence. And particularly, Spirit has always referred to this soul timeline that we are all in right now as the greatest hits timeline. It's not only a dual timeline for those of us who were alive pre 2012, but it's also a timeline where our soul is experiencing kind of the best and the worst of our karma, so to speak, the writing of the balance within our weaves. And so our lives can no longer really just be driven solely by the personality self or our ego, our linear selves. We have to now consciously and consistently attune to our most profound sense of self, this I am presence, this greater aspect of God's spark, which lives within each and every one of us, and which makes the human species completely unique, because it is the only species on this planet and interdimensionally, multidimensionally, that can actually allow the God spark to live and move through it, rather than just be obedient and devoted to it. So, not that we are God also in the sense that we, have all the powers of God, but in a sense, in a moment, we do. It's not that we can command it or demand it or summon it, because that is the mocking of God. It's simply when we are present and open to receive it that God will allow that divinity, that conduit, to move through us, to bring peace, to bring healing, to bring joy, to bring charisma, humor, magnetism, whatever. Sometimes righteous compassion, where we're slicing through the BS. Whatever the moment needs, we will be asked to fluidly step to the plate. And that's why that blueprint, that Christ blueprint that Yeshua, carried so beautifully, and so have many others in the footsteps before and after. It's the ability to pay close attention to those subtleties and to know that every experience is shaping us, and that all of it is influencing us, all of it, including our times, parallel before and past, even though that's very hard for the mind to wrap itself around, but they are all happening in this exact now moment. And so we are reminded we can no longer live our lives driven solely by what we believe to be our personality self or that ego self, that we must consciously, consistently tune to this more profound sense of self and align with Spirit's intent. It may take courage and faith to dive into these depths. In fact, another alternate title tonight was Dancing in the Deep, because Spirit was saying this is not superficial or shallow waters. This is not the kiddie pool, folks. But we have indeed funded, Spirit says, the strength and the power within Spirit now to do so, to claim the destiny that we know is ours, and to act on it now. This is the following the path of the voice of our own soul, which has been calling to us since before we were born. A moment in time where fate meets destiny. And Spirit says this is all in the weave. And before we move into talking about what does that mean, I will open the floor. Spirit mentions that the weave is ramping up for all to feel, see, and experience. And this can often be perceived by the human personality ego self matrix as either euphoric or even dysphoric at first. And even to those around us, we might seem, to quote the phrase, a little batshit crazy. Because when we begin to start seeing and feeling and experiencing the weave for the first time, we are actually seeing our external reality sync up with our internal reality. We're starting to see the spirit with a capital S in the light of all things. And that can be um, ecstatically joyful to the personality self, where you want to see it and share it and shout it from every corner. But if the others, people around you, are not seeing it, if they're veiled from that experience still, then you look, stark raving mad. And that's okay, because that is part of the process of the awakening. And everyone is going to experience their own version of such things. I'm glad that I'm getting feedback from the chat here. And so, we are now moving into this phase where it's not just going to be like selected acolytes of spirit who are able to see and feel and know weave. This is going to be happening for humanity as a whole. And so these euphoric feelings, may sometimes get out of control, as well as these dysphoric feelings at first. And so when we start to understand what we're actually dealing with it, here at a soul level, multidimensionally, then we have the tools on the personality linear egoic level to actually thrive during this experience. So what is weave from spirit's perspective? Well, it's the revelation of God in each moment. It is the living spirit of light, which moves through all of us and everything within matter, time, space, and beyond. And here, Spirit said the beyond is something new that we've was only kind of available to the human before, but because the human is now so multidimensional, we have actually created the greatest show on earth, so to speak, where a lot of eyes, what we might even call very wise eyes from founder races and beings that have far more divine wisdom and intelligence than, of course, the average human. They have eyes now turned on us because they see and feel the activation of the living spirit of light, which is now moving through all of us. And they're seeing it activated through all time, matter, and space. And so weave communicates with its own language. It's not necessarily spirit hitting you over the head with a mallet, although, from time to time in our lives when we are going the wrong way, that might happen to kind of redirect us on our path. But weave itself is more subtle, it's more nuanced. It's the secret language that's known only between ourselves and our creator, unless, of course, we choose to share it with others, like you're doing here in Sanctuary. But it's a personal language. What means something to you may mean absolutely nothing and be irrelevant, to the person sitting next to you in the car, that you're driving down the road. But it may have absolute special meaning and purpose to you, what just passed on the billboard, or, what you just saw, from or overheard from a conversation on the sidewalk. And so this secret language is always giving us signs, codes, messages, secret wisdoms that are known only to us and to God, of course, unless we choose to share that. And when we're in weave, Spirit says we begin to time travel into the eternal now, which is a space beyond this fourth dimensional matrix that we are leaving as a human species. And by reading the signal signs and symbols within our daily weave, we then begin to become the living, breathing weave itself. And we keep time in weave not by watching the clock or waking up to an alarm necessarily, but by remembering that this is a pattern of energy and that a weave always ends where it begins. And often Spirit says we will not even know where it began until it ended. And that happens all the time to me, where something will come completely full circle and it's just one of those like gagunk, like revelation aha moments where suddenly something all makes sense. And it often happens through the most mundane of activations. And so when we are living within and as the weave, it requires this deep acceptance of the nature of paradox, because what might be true in this now moment may simply not be true in the next. And so we have to once again be willing to fluidly move through this spectrum of emotions, this spectrum of actions that the Holy Spirit asks of us, which might not always be comfortable or convenient to our personality selves. And that is part of the surrender. In fact, Spirit says we must, from the ego perspective, be willing to cleave to the weave, in the sense that we must trust that the truth of each moment will reveal itself to us. So we cannot project ourselves forward into the moment and have any type of mental expectation or rehearsed conversation of what is going to happen. We must be present, be the receptive vessel. And that is what allows us to receive the divine information that we seek. Love is the law here. And all light dissolves in grace within the greater weave. This allows us a deeper connection to ourselves, the cosmos, our creator, and all others, and specifically uses relationship as the fastest vehicle to remembering our oneness with God. So before I move on to how do we work within the weave, I'd like to open up the floor. One of the first ways that we can work within this energy of what Spirit calls the weave is to begin to rely on our soul and our spirit selves, this spirit with a greater S, to help us with some of the harder or bigger decisions in life. And so rather than relying on our minds or the force of our will to kind of generate what we want to happen, Spirit says ask for three palpable felt sense signs from Spirit before making a big decision, and know that they will come to us, and trust that we will feel them, know them, and recognize them when they are coming our way. As well, we're encouraged to ask to have the spiritual discernment to observe the sign. So give us the eyes to see, or the ears to hear, or the heart to know that this is speaking to us from our weave. And then give our ego the surrendering ability to accept it fully, and to not mentalize it or try to kind of make up what it might be, but instead to receive the divine interpretation of the message. So this is not jumping to conclusions or assumptions of what we hope it might be in the weave. This is instead allowing the divine spirit true interpretation to be revealed to us. And here, Spirit says that weave reveals the magical part of our personal soul and its unique conversation and interpretation of the divine. So each of us has our own personal, mystical, magical, beautiful experience that can really only be understood between ourselves and God. Now, of course, when we meet another person who is in tune in this way, whew, like, wow, do the stars align with that? Because now you have a personality and a soul who are aligned, who are not out there making waves with their thoughts and lower vibrational emotions coming from a reactive place. You now have a present being. And when you have two people in their presence, in their soul, then the unique conversation of God takes on a whole new interpretation of the divine. That phrase, wherever two or more are gathered, there I am also. That is the I am presence. That is the full great presence of Source being available to come to us and through us, as us and for us. And so Spirit says, ask to know, and you will receive this wisdom. However, we must create the space mentally and physically for our souls to emerge from within us and to access this guidance. Well, how do we do that? Through meditation, through barefoot walking, through putting our hands in the dirt and working in our gardens, through staying off technology, for the first hour, hour and a half of our day, if we can, do that within our livelihoods and family lives, and to really make sure that we remember that these four walls are not necessarily protecting us, and these screens are not necessarily providing ways for us to thrive. They are disconnecting us from our true source. And so being outside, checking out, what does the sky look like today? What do the stars look like tonight? If you live in a place where you can see the stars clearly, which, beautiful to you, like very amazing, because that's starting to become fewer and far between. And so really appreciating this magnetism and this connection that we receive from nature, because it is the quickest and fastest way to be connected to the mother spirit, which then of course is the kind of deep-seated pocket that we need to be sitting in so that we have the presence to fully receive the weave. Before I move into what Spirit calls frequent weave errors, I will open up the floor. When we start opening to weave, and we talked about having this euphoric, maybe almost manic sometimes feeling when this starts happening, this awakening, or even this dysphoric despair, if we don't fully feel the love of what we are seeing behind the veils lifting, because sometimes there can be, some things that are terrifying within the awakening process. And if we do not have the compassion of grace within that process, that can feel very hopeless and helpless and despairing. And so, Spirit wants us to know that there are frequent errors that are made when we first begin opening to weave. And the first is that we may mistake the false light, or what Spirit calls the third eye codes, as true weave instead of partial truth. And there's a lot of false light third eye codes out there, especially on the internet right now. There's a lot of gurus. There's a lot of people claiming to know a lot of things, and maybe they do, but you will only know that to be true through your spiritual discernment, because a lot of false light is very shiny. It's a very flashy. And it does contain partial truth. So it will give you that hit inside that's like, huh, that makes sense, or yeah, that does feel right. But it will also be laced with often bravado or performative gesturing, anything that is taking energy away from source and kind of redirecting it on to that person, or onto that particular system, or program. So we're really encouraged to pay attention to the false light. And of course, this doesn't just happen within spiritual movements. It happens within truther movements. It's happening within all of Hollywood. It's happening within all of our political system. All of that is a display of light and shadow right now, and specifically false light from Spirit's perspective, because even a good portion of our charities and activist movements, which rely on the heart energy and good intentions of others, are also based on this false light paradigm, where they're actually taking from the very people that they are claiming to serve. But we can only know this false light to be what it is when we have the eyes to see. And so we're encouraged to pray for that. And we're also encouraged, once again, to make space to receive the wisdom in the moment by meditating and by taking that space to know who we are and to want to come at life from a responsive place rather than from a reactive place. This is divine intelligence, Spirit says, when we come up against this false light without the true spiritual discernment of the wisdom of the divine feminine aspect of God. So that's why it's hitting home in some ways. We're getting divine intelligence out of a lot of these false light third eye codes. But when we don't have true spiritual discernment of the wisdom which comes from the divine feminine aspect of God, we may begin to believe this false light as true. And Spirit said, false light, we will be through false light, we will always be distracted toward a half truth or a shiny representation of source within. And it lacks access to the deeper wisdom, which is found within felt cellular and cellular experiences of God in our body. So if you aren't getting that like zing tingle, that feeling of like, oh my gosh, that like, I just got chills, or I just got goosebumps, that is God like resonating in our bodies. We know what that feels like when it happens. And so you may have moments of that within the false light. And when you experience that, take that, use your spiritual discernment to know like, okay, that resonated as truth. But know that all that pretends to be light is not light. And so that is one of the most frequent weave errors that occurs, particularly when we are first awakening. The second, spirit says, is resisting the weave instead of surrendering to it, especially the small things. And we will really be encouraged to learn divine obedience, and we will receive weave tests and challenges, which are not necessarily fun to the personality self because they don't always come at comfortable or convenient times. And you will have that choice to like do what would make you look best to others in the moment, or go cry in a bathroom for 20 minutes, whatever the weave is calling for. But often when we do not listen, we kind of regret it later. And so we're really encouraged to surrender to the weave, and even the small things. And this is one of the things that my ego has and still has from time to time the biggest problem with, but definitely in the beginning, is spirit would encourage me, like, move something to the left, or like, go take your laundry out now. And I was either lazy or I just didn't feel like doing it or whatever, who knows, whatever prideful thing I was feeling in the moment, but I wouldn't do it. And then an hour later, the thing would like dump or spill everywhere, or, someone would mess up all the stuff that was in the laundry. And every time I would just be like, oh my God, like if I had just done the little thing. And now I've learned because so many times, like this crazy, I can't curse too much on here, but so much has happened that I do not. I move the thing. I now move the thing if it asks me to move it in that moment, and it's always a nudge. It's, a lot of times when people get one-to-one readings, they'll say like, "Well, if I just heard spirit like you do," and it's like, well, we all have access to this, and it's not like spirit comes at me with a bullhorn, or, sometimes if I'm way off track, but for the most part, it's subtle, and it's these nuances in the weavies. It's these slight activations. And for those of you who have had the private readings and mentorships, you know that a lot of the readings, and even here on Sanctuary, come through in lyrics, because spirit is kind of encapsulating the soul, is trying to encapsulate the most expanded like piece of information and offer it to us in the simplest, purest form. And often poetry and music is the quickest way to do that. So we're encouraged to surrender to this divine obedience within the weave, these tests, these challenges, and to surrender instead of, resist them. In spirits is especially the small things. And I'm sure that that was directed at me. So this bad attitude versus giving gratitude. When we start really tuning into the weave, the ego can take a lot of things as, or perceive them as, happening to us negatively. And once again, this goes back to these initiations, these weave tests, these challenges. But it's really hard sometimes not to have a bad attitude or not to fall into a victim consciousness. And yet, that is one of the greatest tests, to have this radical gratitude, this ability to stay true and firm in our gratitude, even when we are feeling not. And I remember, during some of the hardest times for me, I would have to be like, I have a roof over my head. I have running water. Like, I can sleep in a bed tonight. I have food to eat. Like, I had to just keep repeating these things over and over again, because otherwise I was going to fall really deep into this despair, or this helplessness or hopelessness, or even simply like resentment or victim consciousness. So once again, we're encouraged to don't think the weave is happening to us, but to remember that it's happening for us, and that we will always be given the perspective of the Holy Spirit when we ask to have eyes to see and ears to hear. So we can kind of chuck that bad attitude in the trash. Of course, it's okay to feel anything we need to feel. It's just that when we start directing it outward, or we start harming ourselves or our lives with it, then it becomes a problem. So encouraged to stay in this radical gratitude. The next weave error was overlooking weave cues because the mind deems them as too insignificant, mundane, or trivial to have the ego be bothered by them. And I think that's kind of what I was speaking to earlier, like, I don't feel like doing that right now. Or it just doesn't seem significant. Like, why? Like, that was what my ego would always like, why? I don't understand. And so that was something that I always had to come up against. I always had to have the consequence to be like, oh, that was the why. I guess that's why. And so when we overlook these weave cues, it's often just the mind, either being too busy, too distracted, or even, just forgetting, like, oh, I'll get to that, and then not doing it. And so knowing that it's actually the mundane and the trivial, what we term to be the insignificant codes, that actually often have the most give within our weave. So if we're finding ourselves to be stagnant, or like we're just not moving in the way we want to move, or we're feeling like we can't get balanced or not aligned, pay attention to the little things because it's often the little things that are trying to get our attention the most. And then the last thing Spirit said was that often before a big weave shift in our lives, we can feel like a scrap of tissue paper like floating in the wind. And it's very easy in that moment to give it all back and to kind of, be that guy from the movie The Matrix that goes back and eats the steak. He's just like, you know what, this is too hard. I'm done. I'm going to pretend that it's real, even though I know it's not. And so it's very easy in that moment to cry uncle and to just opt out of the game. Like, this is too hard. I'm just going to eat a tub of ice cream. I'm just going to play, game on my phone, or I'm going to watch a show on Netflix, whatever it is we need to do to check out. And while that's okay, Spirit is also alerting to us that it's actually a really powerful feeling to feel like this scrap of tissue paper, because it means that we are about to unfold a new big weave, and that when we resist it or we avoid it or deny it rather than surrender into it, then we lose some of its depth and some of its fulfillment. Of course, we never actually truly lose it, but we may for the moment. And so we're very much encouraged to pay attention that this is another frequent, quote, weave error that we might make when we are first awakening to this reality, where we start to realize that everything is speaking to us all the time. So before I move into how does weave communicate, I will open up the floor. How does weave communicate? Well, it has its own personal intuitive language and codes. We talked about how we each have our own personal language with the divine, and it's often quite humorous and quite personal, meaning something special to only us or something only we would understand, kind of it like we would have an inside joke with a best friend. And some of the quote laws of weave are that a weave always ends where it begins. So we have that full circle moment. And like I said earlier, it often comes with a revelation or aha moments. And it also comes with its own language. And for me personally, with my relationship with God and my soul, weave was the word that was given to me. So I'll use words in readings or in my own life like, well, that's an old weave, or we got to upweave that or reweave that. And upweave and reweave are two very different things. That's a new weave, that's a dead weave, all these things, when we're working, when I'm working with myself with spirit, but also with one to one with others. And so we'll start to have a language of our own. And when we understand that language, we'll then also start to recognize our habits and our patterns that through these fractals of a larger consciousness we can tune into. And when we tune into it, then we can morph and shift it and move it through our own alchemy, through our own upweaving and reweaving, if you will, of our past actions, our thoughts, and our feelings. And Spirit said that all weaves, no matter how our personality self or ego self is experiencing them, are actually leading us closer to source. So before I move into how does weave move, I will open up the floor. How does weave move? It is spiral, so it is not linear, although it encapsulates the linear, but it is moving in a cyclical pattern, and it always ends where it begins. And it often comes with this deep inner gnosis, like we talked about, or this revelation at its conclusion, as it up levels us to new weaves, opportunities, resources, relationships, and experiences. So part of weaving is that we have to understand that to understand, to even feel the weave or see it, we are using the soul complex in our lower three chakras. Because when we have cleared those out and when we have created the space for kind of weave to land within us, we will always be placed right place, right time. So weave is not coming from necessarily divine downloads that are coming into our, sixth and seventh chakra areas, our crown chakra, or, that what we might call more heady complex. It's actually coming from our lower three chakras. And so it's coming from a more divine feminine aspect of God. No matter how we are presenting in this physical form, we are always aspects of all because we are the divine spark. We are source also. So this unique ability to place us right place, right time. Well, what happens when we're right place, right time? We meet the right people. We get the right resources. We have the best experiences. And often it's it's a lot of fun because that's what spirit enjoys. Spirit enjoys being in joy. So we have to allow time to move through us rather than us moving through time, which of course is a mind bender. But as we step into weave, we will begin to feel this in our body. We will begin to feel that time moves through us rather than us moving through linear time. So we no longer feel like we're aging or we're kind of on this path to death, that all humans believe, we only have this certain finite time. We start to realize that's a consciousness choice, that death is just a transition. And in this timeline, we don't even have to choose to make that transition in the same way. Of course, we will only know this through our own personal relationship with God. And so that's why we are always encouraged to pray, to meditate, to go within. And this is how we start to feel that time is moving through us. And so this weave then transcends the personality ego matrix. So we're transcending the third and fourth density, and we are moving into the space beyond birth and death. So how does it move is very important, but what does it feel like? How does weave feel? Well, we must develop the felt sense once again of the lower three chakras if we wish to experience the fullness of weave. And we only do that by clearing out the space. And so that means dealing with our personal traumas, dealing with our woundings from the past, not just kind of suppressing them down further and further, because as we know, that leads to mental and emotional situations, but it also leads to physical health problems as well. Weave is not intellectual, so it can only be experienced through our felt intuitive sense and interpreted through the heart. So this is not an interpretation that the mind can come up with. In fact, the mind is an observer and a servant to this larger weave. In fact, the soul and the heart are the conduits with spirit. They are the Trinity which navigates through all the hills and valleys and the shadows of light and dark that will present within weave as a whole. And spirit says that we'll sense it through nudges, nigglings, nuances, inner promptings which are easy to ignore if we are distracted or not mentally present. Weave creates an energetic man. I can't even speak on this one. I'm feeling weave so much. It can't come out my mouth. It creates an energetic tapestry which can be felt intuitively and which gives us the firm footing when all is dissolving around us. And that's incredibly important right now because a lot of our institutions and structures and systems are going to be dissolving right in front of our eyes over the next 5 to 10 years. And so we're going to have needed to create a new energetic tapestry, and specifically one that is connected to our felt intuitive sense, because this is the only thing that's going to give us the firm footing and the alignment with spirit that we need moving forward. So I believe this is the last part of weave. Nope, I got a couple more here. Let me check. Got so much here. Okay, so before I move on to the next part, I will open the floor again. So now Spirit is talking about how does weave work? It is an energetic process of densification, crystallization, release, and a return to the void, which can feel hollow to the personality self. So it can almost feel like you're swimming in too deep of waters during the hollow part of the process. And Spirit says, in fact, the ego can resist or feel paralysis at any level of the weave, at any part of the process of densification, crystallization, release, or return to the void, the hollow, so to speak. Densification can make us feel heavy in weave. And if we give into the archonic, lower vibrational thought arrows that are kind of being slung at us, then we'll begin feeling emotionally and even physically dense, leading to fatigue, inflammation, pain, depression, mental haze, confusion, anxiety, despair, or even paralyzing fear. We are encouraged through all stages of the weave process. And so this is not just happening once, this is happening over and over and over. Every weave that we have, we are moving through densification, crystallization of what we've acquired, an integration of it, a release, and then a return to the void so that we can receive our next weave. And so we're encouraged through all of these stages to get our bare feet on the earth or get our hands in the dirt, as once again, this is the fastest way to connect to the magnetization of the planet and to uplift our energy bodies in alignment with source so that we have the physical ability to keep up with all of this, quote, weave work. During the crystallization process of weave, we can feel focused and clear. We can even feel like we're on a mission to get things done. This is usually one of the more fun parts of the process. And spirits is even a very enjoyable part of the process, unless we are prone to feeling or experiencing mania. So there are people who, when they are in the part of crystallization, can feel like, almost a little frenetically overjoyed or unable to ground themselves. And so each of the parts of these processes have light and shadow that we will be working with. And each of us is made up differently. So we will each experience part of these processes differently. Some people that I talk to love the densification. I have a friend who's like, oh, like densification is my favorite. Like I love the heaviness of it. And other people, are like, man, that is like a slog. Like I really have a hard time getting through that part of the weave. And sometimes we're only in this process for minutes or moments. And sometimes it's days or months or even years, depending on what the weave is that we are moving through personally, how deep a trauma can possibly be if it's, a weave that's carrying a denser vibration with it. And so we as we kind of move through this process, we start to really understand it more deeply, because we're having that personal wisdom. It's not like we're just being left out in the desert. God and spirit, whatever you want to call the nameless, is guiding us through it. So during crystallization, we can feel focused, clear, and on a mission to get things done. We also talked about the shadow of that, feeling manic or in a frenetic type of place. We then move into the release part of weave, which we often experience mentally, emotionally, and physically. So sometimes we experience this as actually crying tears, or we might feel the need to move energy through sweat, or kind of like moving it through anger, like moving it out into the weave in some way. And when in alignment, Spirit said, this feels like the shedding of our old identities and all that is not serving the soul. It is a natural process. And Spirit says, when we're in resistance to this time of release, it can be because we're distracting ourselves through addictive habits or tendencies, and can be in an energy of denial or avoidance. So it can have that wonderful cathartic feeling, or it can be giving us this feeling of, I just am not ready to look at that right now. I'm just going to distract myself. There's something over here I can dig into, and, going to move on with my life. So once again, knowing that this process has a lot of light and shadow to it, and all of us is here to teach us something. And so the last phase of the process of weave is what I would call the hollow. And many enjoy this space. It's the 0 point where all and nothing are existing simultaneously. But it can also be experienced as deep longing or yearning, or even emptiness or helplessness or despair, because we do not necessarily feel that fulfilled feeling. So when we recognize it as a fresh start, as a blank slate, as a starting over within each weave, then we can kind of enjoy it as such. And we no longer feel that more shadow aspect of it that leads to that longing, or that feeling like my desire is just always out of my reach. And it's very easy for the personality self to get kind of stuck in these phases. And so that's why Spirit is giving us these tools and these resources to help us understand when we're in it, so that we don't have to be kind of languishing in it forever, that we can recognize that it's a moment in time. And ultimately, it's always leading us closer to source and to our own healing. We choose to experience weave at any level of consciousness, or we can choose it. Spirit says it's our free will to choose any level of consciousness with which to experience weave, including to ignore it completely. But Spirit does encourage us to live at the vibration of weave, so that we are tuned into our greatest joy, peace, passion, and purpose. Spirit also acknowledges that there's a wealth of wisdom which is learned and experienced when we are, quote, stranding ourselves at the lower vibrations of consciousness and experiencing what we would call suffering within the human spirit. So Spirit is once again, saying it doesn't matter if you pay attention to weave or not, because you're going to learn, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. We always get to choose. It's always bringing us back to source. Weave as a whole, it teaches us to experience life through sensation. And it may not always feel good or pleasant to the personality ego self, but it will always feel and be purposeful. So now that we've talked about weave, I'm going to open up the floor before we move on to the final supporting energies of the evening. One of the supporting energies tonight of this dance the dance energy, don't sit this one out, is we're really encouraged to stop giving away our power and really to notice what we're giving away our power to. Is it the media? Is it the government? Is it our relationships? Is it our job? Is it our own, addictions or habits? Where are we giving away our power because we're failing to recognize or acknowledge the many positive qualities that we possess? And where could we be dishonoring or disrespecting our true worth? Where might we falsely believe that others are better or experiencing better things than us or have been more worthy than us in some way? And we're encouraged that it is time to let go of these beliefs and to truly allow our beauty, talent, and creativity to shine through. We're also called, and that's that whole like, don't sit this one out. Like, you have this also, Spirit is saying, like, please allow it to come through. And we often do this by recognizing the light in another. So we're really called to recognize the light in others right now and to specifically call this light forth from them when it is dim or when we start to notice that their spark is going out. Every time that we see beauty in another, let it serve to remind us of the beauty within ourselves. And as our perceptions are brought more into balance, we will become a more effective force in the world and have a greater impact on it and everyone around us. When we acknowledge all the beautiful qualities that we possess, we are opening the door to endless streams of abundance and blessings which are stemming from the heart of creation. So these are pure blessings. These are not what we receive when we kind of strive or force our way to our goal and then maybe suddenly aren't even satisfied with the end results. This is the pure abundance, the blessings that stem from the heart of God and from the heart of creation. And the very next energy to come through was so close to this energy of giving away power that I want to keep it, within the same frequency here, because the question was, where are we degrading ourselves or lessening the importance of our impact on the world? Have we allowed someone or something to dishonor us? Have we failed to stand up for our beliefs in order to get something that we wanted? We're encouraged to examine the places where we might be aligning ourselves with lower ideas as our companions. So this could be doubt, could be fear, worry, anxiety, bitterness, anger, scarcity, or what we would call poverty consciousness, unworthiness, etc. And where are we selling ourselves short? Where are we not giving ourselves enough credit? So Spirit wants us to know we're always led to the highest ground when we begin to follow our inner guidance. That goes back to following the weave, opening ourselves up to this inner guidance that is matched in synchronicity with our external reality. They are one and the same. This is an important responsibility, and it's brought to us when this energy appears in the weave. So we are being required to be the spiritual warriors, the peaceful warriors, and to have the courage to step up to the plate, to be ready, to respect ourselves, to believe in our purpose, and to know that we are being chosen to be the embodiment of the sacred in the world. And we're challenged to be the best that we can be out there and to know that Spirit is actually counting on it. We engage our highest selves when we are present with all of life. What can we turn into a sacred ritual? And for me, I find that it's easiest to incorporate the sacred into what I'm already doing. So praying, when I'm brushing my teeth, or going into a moment of meditation when I'm tying my shoes, or when I'm in the shower, when I'm at a stoplight, or eating breakfast and having a cup of coffee, whatever that moment is that I'm already doing. It is the sacred ritual. And so being present to that moment and honoring it as such. So where can we pause and remember that each moment is sacred and know that in saying thank you, we are opening up the portals of gratitude and the wealth then of mind, body, and spirit that comes once again from that heart of creation. And the lyrics here were from Collective Soul, you gotta let your light shine down. So, our last energy for the evening is all about going for our dreams. And so, we have to kind of deal with some of these shadowy parts of self in order to create the space for us to go for our dreams. And once again, we're asked these questions from Spirit. Are we plagued by regret over a decision or decisions that we didn't make or paths that we didn't choose? Are we wondering what might have been had we gone a different road? Do we fear that it's too late, or we're too old, too tired, or without energy, or paralyzed from within, or any kind of despair that it would prevent us from pursuing our heart's desire at this time? Spirit wants us to know our spirit within is activating all awareness, and it is inviting us to reclaim lost dreams. And in all capital letters was take them back off the shelf. Some things may indeed be gone forever, and for those we mourn and we accept and surrender to, but others only appear that way, Spirit says, and are really just waiting for us to breathe life back into them once again. Our divine energy is calling us to separate what is dead from what is merely dormant. And we're encouraged to bury the dead with peace, to accept it, and to give the inactive or ignored love in our hearts all that we have in order to revive it, whether this is in our art, our relationships, careers, even our physical health. We're encouraged to find the courage right now to go for our dreams. It is possible, once again, to forget the excuses. So I think it was a couple calls ago, it was called No More Excuses, to let go of our fears. So to trust that there's always a choice to have faith. We can have faith in fear, or we can have faith in love. And so fear is always going to tell us why it's impossible, but love is always going to tell us why it is possible. And so we give our full attention to what wants to live within us today, and to what we may have neglected within ourselves or not fully supported. To let our inner lover, our inner artist and adventurer thrive, and to quit using our ego or our intellect to kill off these more creative parts of ourselves. And of course, our society loves to do that as well, or it loves to bring it all just to the superficial and to the surface. And so we're really encouraged to go deeper and to really go into the creative parts of self that are most connected to our spirit and with Source. This creative urge that is trying to emerge will bring new vitality to our lives. We're encouraged to take this change and to fully believe in ourselves and what we are capable of, especially in alignment with Spirit, to do everything we must to make our dreams come true, to not hold back, and to give our hearts our full attention. And so tonight, Spirit really wanted us to dance the dance, to not sit this one out. And I rarely hear Spirit have a don't in any of the guidance, through personal readings or through Sanctuary. But this don't sit this one out felt really like someone who has lived it coming to me and saying, like, you're going to really regret it if you miss this one. Like, this is the one that means something. And so I really feel from Spirit's perspective, we're all being given an opportunity right now, not just those of us here on the call or those listening in the beyond, but all of us here on this planet and in this multidimensional multiverse, to dance a new dance, something that the soul has never experienced before. But it will require honoring our soul's purpose. It will require, making that space to reflect on what does it mean to show up to every moment as a divine conduit of grace, as something bigger than our personality linear selves. How do we begin to live as the transcendent of time, where time is moving through us, rather than us moving through time? And how do we pay attention to these cues, these signals, these signs in the weave that is ramping up from Spirit's perspective? Well, we do it through preparation, prayer, and sacred ritual, which we can do all throughout our days. So we're encouraged, no more excuses. Go for your dreams and give your heart your full attention. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you, everyone on the call and in the chat. And we will move into the after party, all of us on the call. I will see everyone in the replay next week. Thank you all again for being here. I appreciate you so much. And we will talk to you soon.